All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Ralph Perrey, for joining me today. I'm going to give you the floor to let you introduce yourself a bit. I think everyone that's in the affordable housing space probably knows who you are very well, but we're doing this brown bag and affordable session so that people outside of our kind of silo and circles can understand this process, and we'll continue to bring thought leaders every week to do information so that we can be a resource to the public at large who wants to create and help with this issue of affordable housing. So again,
Mhm.
thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. I think it's a great idea that you're starting these, and I'm very flattered to be the first one out of the chute. So we'll try to make this one work real well so that folks tune in again for others. But as you mentioned, as executive director of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, I have the good fortune of leading the state's housing finance agency. And what we do, simply stated, we spend a lot of time financing mortgages for home buyers in that moderate middle income range. We have several $billion worth of those loans on our books, and that generates all the revenue that pays for what THDA does. There are no state appropriated dollars involved in this. Not just all the operations, but it also generates the additional earnings that we can plow back to do other things to support affordable housing. Our down payment programs, our network of home buyer assistance counselors, the grant programs that we're able to administer, and the support we can find for special opportunities and pilot programs and such. It is frankly, well, I should mention, in addition to that, we now get to administer 12 federal programs on the state's behalf. And this is, I think, a larger portfolio of responsibilities than most of the nation's state housing finance agencies have. We do all that with a staff of about 300 people. I view it as a real vote of confidence on the part of state government that they give us those responsibilities, and we have a terrific team at work at all those things.
That is fantastic. It's just a lot of work, and people may or may not be familiar with THDA, but I hope that this gives everybody a really good view. So one of my kind of directions and focus inside of this brown bag and affordable is making sure that for-profit as well as nonprofit developers can understand how to make this pencil out. How does this work? And I think that THDA is a good partner inside of that work. Wanted to see if we could just kind of level set and start with the overview of what is Tennessee's affordable housing situation right now.
Well, I'm going to charitably say challenging. This is probably the case everywhere in the country. There are not enough units, and that drives up the prices, particularly of entry-level housing for purchase. But it also puts a lot of upward pressure on rents. And we see this in very fast-growing areas around Nashville, certainly, but it's more or less the case everywhere in the state. And that is, I think it cries out for, we need to build more units, and we especially need to develop more at the entry-level price points for homeowners and in the more affordable range, workforce housing range for rental properties. It's a challenge, and I think there's a lot of conversation both nationally and here in Tennessee about tools and techniques to make it a little easier to develop affordable housing. On the financing side, the picture, though, is rather good. The interest rate environment is favorable. THDA, I mean, we're still in the low threes, and we can bring down payment assistance and closing cost assistance to those customers. So it is a good time to buy if you can find a good place to buy. And that is the challenge. I think buyers are finding they can sell in about 15 minutes. Buying the next property takes a little bit longer. I think, several years ago, if you had asked me what's the biggest barrier to first-time home buyers, I would have said lack of down payment resources. Now, I think it's just lack of supply. In a lot of communities, it is just very hard to find that home you can afford that's in a THDA price point, for example, where you're not bidding against 27 other people. And that I think is going to be a continued drag, specifically on our mortgage business this year.
Absolutely. And so, in that space, I think
Mhm.
the given number right now is about 10% over ask. So if there's a property, and I
Mhm.
personally have experienced this. It's funny being the executive director of the Affordable Housing Coalition, and you're like,
Yeah.
I just want to buy this house right here. And so it's 10% over ask. That's kind of become the
Mhm.
general rule. But if there are buyers that need affordable housing, how do they compete with these investors?
Mhm. Well, they can't. I mean, that's just it. Someone who comes to town ready to write a check today, no conditions, no questions asked. No, you can't compete with that if you're going through any kind of mortgage finance option. I think this is going to be particularly challenging in very hot markets. I mean, the Middle Tennessee is growing. They still have about 80 people a day moving into the greater Nashville area. Uh, that's going to be very attractive for out-of-state investors who bring a lot of money to it. And we'll just see where that goes. The pressure is less intense in other parts of the state, but the short answer is you can't compete with someone who brings a bag of money and says, "Here's your payment."
Right, right. I think I'm gonna have to go shake that tree, see if we can't get some coins to fall out for my own bag of money. Um,
Uh,
and so, given that, if we shift a little bit from the home buyer, private home buyer side to the developer side,
mhm,
the lack of properties out there is the biggest
mhm,
piece. So, nonprofit developers have often been ahead of this game, right? They understand how
mhm,
to get the funds and apply for the grants and all of these things. THDA has done something that's interesting, that's nonprofit and for-profit developer focused. And I just want to know, like, what
mhm,
other things are available for for-profit
mhm,
developers if they're interested in getting in this space?
mhm. I think you will see more local governments and even some corporations that are interested in seeing more affordable housing in the community, uh, providing some subsidy and support and encouragement for affordable housing development. I think I was reading not too long ago, when you're thinking about developing an affordable product, either for rent or for sale, you're really looking at the 4 L's: land, lumber, labor, local rules and regulations. Land, if it costs a certain amount to acquire a good piece of property, it limits your ability to make an affordable home a reality on that place. It just won't pencil out. So that's an opportunity for communities to make land available at below market cost or substantially reduced. Attach some conditions to it, but if you reduce the developer's acquisition cost, it makes it a lot easier to develop a property that's going to be affordable. Lumber, treat that as a euphemism for building materials as a whole. This is one of the less understood aspects of the COVID panic. Everything shut down, and that had all sorts of ripple effects through the supply chain. So even when people went back to work, getting materials, getting them in the right quantities, prices have doubled and tripled for certain important things like wood. All of that makes it very difficult to project what it's going to cost you to build something. Uh, can you even get the materials? And if you do, how much more are they going to cost you than what you're planning for? Cost of labor, much the same thing. The industry really never recovered from the downturn of 28 and 2010. A lot of people just got out of the construction business. And I'm not aware of any builder in Tennessee who is not always looking for more people who have building trades experience. And so consequently, the people who are still in that, well, you pay more to get them. That adds a cost component. And the last factor figures into it too. There are a lot of very well-intentioned rules and regulations about how we want things built and where. When you layer them all on top of the other, it can add 30, 40, 50% to the cost of building a home. And at some point, it may be worthwhile to look at whether you need all of those requirements in every type of housing development. And just working through that, that's a time-consuming process. But all of those things add to the cost of developing it. And it makes it prohibitively expensive to build in some areas where affordable housing is needed.
Fantastic. Those are the things that, storied history developers have worked through. Like you said, between, 2008 and now, that still people kind of looking over their shoulder out of fear of what's exactly going to happen. And so personally, I've worked with a few different organizations to increase diversity in development, and how do we get people who care about the neighborhoods that maybe they came from, or people that look like them. We have a lot of emerging developer programs that are everywhere. What does an opportunity look like given those challenges of those L's? What is the opportunity for an emerging developer in this space?
Well, if they're a nonprofit and they show that at least their principals have a significant amount of experience. I mean, we can't just, give a grant to two guys with a truck full of tools. But, if you bring some experience as you form that housing nonprofit, there are grants you can compete for and get. I think part of that is understanding the lay of the land in the neighborhood where you wish to develop. It's going to be important that the neighbors feel good about what it is you're planning to put on their street, that you get to know the local codes and regulatory departments, because about a half dozen of them have to give you a permit for one thing or another. And it's good to know, well, what are those things? What order do I have to get them? Who do I go see for them? And that helps you plan and prepare better, maybe expedite those approvals. Time is money. And then, of course, it's, can you acquire a piece of property where it is you want to build at a price that makes sense? If it's going to cost you $100,000 just to get the lot, probably can't build something that you can then sell for $200,000, not without losing a lot of money. And this is where I would be alert to, depending on where in Tennessee you are, whether there are sources of subsidy that might be helpful. Some communities, some cities, they want to encourage infill development in some of their neighborhoods, and they have made dollars available for that purpose. We have a pilot program, our appraisal gap program, that we're evaluating now, but in places like Memphis or Chattanooga, what it costs you to build a house is more than what the finished product will appraise for. So no one's going to build that house. So working with a select group of nonprofit partners will cover up to a $20,000 gap. So that lets someone build that home, sell it for what it appraises for, and if that's 15 or 20,000 less than they have in it, we make them whole at THDA. The thought is, let's encourage some of that infill development, and then perhaps in time you erase that appraisal gap because you're improving property values on that street or that block. So we've been running that for about 1.5 years now, and we'll do some analysis on what the interest and demand has been, and whether we're seeing what we'd hoped to see. Actually, in Washington, there's a federal legislation, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, that is a much bigger and, of course, much more complicated approach to this same thing. That'll probably be an interesting thing to watch over the coming year. If it were to become law, then that would seem to be a mechanism to support similar kinds of development and infill.
Absolutely. What's the name of the program that you all run for that?
It's just our appraisal gap program, and it's a pilot, and it's really just available in 3 places: Memphis, Chattanooga, and Oak Ridge. Okay. We only put about $1 million into it for starters. So we limited the number of participants, and really just want to see, is anybody interested in doing this? And if so, how's that working? I think we've got about 35 or 40 in the pipeline.
Okay.
So that's encouraging, but I want to take a look at the data and see whether we're getting what we expected and hoped for.
Okay. Because I feel like after this, you may have a few more applications. So
Yeah, very likely. Yeah.
okay,
Just
good.
there's information about it on our website at thda.org.
Perfect.
And our community programs division team, I'm sure, would be glad to tell you a little bit more about it. At this point, if that is of interest, if you are a builder, you would want to likely partner with one of the eligible nonprofits, because they're hiring builders to do this work. Most of them don't do their own actual construction, but we're working with people like United Housing in Memphis, Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, very, very solid and experienced organizations, and they'd be good folks to talk with.
So I hear a lot about partnerships, which is perfect, and I think that's part of development, is being able to create a team and partner well. Must play well with others, so that's always it's always good to have.
Yeah, it's essential.
It's essential. We talked a little bit about just the silos and the way that we talk about things in affordable housing, and the words and different things that we use. And one of the barriers I often think to people coming into this world is just all the acronyms that fly around, and understanding part of this work, right? And I tell people, stop me if I start talking about it, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I start speaking Spanish and I tell people, wait, pause, stop me when you get lost. So, give everyone an overview, just a definition for AMI, if you would.
Sure. Well, that's an easy one, actually. Area median income, and what that simply means is that's the income for that county in most cases. And half the people who live in that community make less money than that, and half who live in the community make more money than that. It's not an average of what's out there, but it gives you the midpoint. Half of your residents make less money than this. And the eligibility for a number of federal and state programs will be based on that number or some percentage of it. Tax credit program, you're looking for renters at 60% of the area median income, for example. These rent relief payments that we can provide, up to 80% of the area median income. We actually have a chart on our webpage so that you don't have to do that math in your head. But that's probably one of the more easy ones. You want to throw a few others out.
I'll throw them to you.
Almost everything at the federal level has an acronym, and we try to make use of those as little as we can when we're talking with folks. Excuse me.
Right. Are there any other buzzwords that you can think of? I know AMI is kind of the easy one, but is there anything else that maybe we use all the time that you think every man?
I think when folks have worked in a program for a long time, they'll just refer to it, LIHEAP, the low income home energy assistance program. LIHTC is the low income housing tax credit. The list goes on, and it gets more complicated as you get on into HUD programs. A lot of people still refer to the Housing Choice Voucher Program as Section 8.
Right.
Because, back in the day, it was Section 8 of some much larger bill. So you still see some of that around there. But by and large, I think it's okay to ask. Especially when they come up with new programs and new acronyms. I have actually asked our staff a couple times, remind me what this is.
Right.
Because it's not always obvious on its face.
Right. I think LIHTC's a good one, and there's a few, they're all of those. I use them all the time, and then I realize people start glazing over and say, oh, wait, pause, let me open up.
Yeah. It's always a good idea to write it out the first couple of times, just so everybody understands what we're talking about here.
Right. So we speak our own language.
Yeah.
So what other agencies, as you mentioned, we talked about playing well with others, right? Partnerships are important, but what agencies should they kind of partner with, an emerging developer or an established developer to create this affordable housing? What are some great partnerships?
Well, if you're just getting started in it, I wouldn't try to just start from scratch. I'd try to partner up with somebody who's done it before. Uh, Tax credit development is a varsity sport. You don't want to try that on your own without very experienced partners. It's just too complicated, and there are too many ways you can run afoul of the rules. And it's an IRS program; they don't mess around.
Right.
You got to be serious about that. If you're just looking to do some modest amount of infill development, a good place to start is maybe in partnership with one of the established housing nonprofits in your community.
Hmm.
The neighbor work affiliates are always really good. A lot of the FAHI members who are primarily in East Tennessee are experienced, and they're often willing to help people get started. They're a good source of partnership, and they may just be looking for skilled builders who will take on a project for them. And that's a good way to get their foot in the door. The other thing, if you're going to just do this on a one-off basis, you got a piece of land next to yours and you want to put a house on it and sell it to somebody. I would get familiar with what's required locally as far as codes, zoning, water, sewer, all the, who has to sign off on this and in what order, and maybe connect with someone in those departments. So you know what you have to prepare on the front end. You don't want to get started and then realize, well, I needed to get an environmental review. And so I've got to stop and I got to hire someone, and you lose 8 months.
Right.
And, you're paying interest on the money you borrowed for your project the whole time. So, it's just like, you measure twice, cut once. I would do your due diligence on the front end so you understand what has to be, what you have to line up in one order to do that. And, especially if you're thinking about doing something new in a neighborhood, like let's put 5 tiny homes behind the church. I do some work with the neighbors to make sure they understand what these are going to look like and who's going to live there. Folks get real concerned about how new development might impact the value of their property.
Right.
And that works at all price points and in all neighborhoods. And just, being proactive on the front end and talking about what you want to do saves you some trouble and headache down the road.
Oh my goodness. Do you mean to tell me that if you do a little neighborhood outreach, that could actually help you?
Mm-hmm.
I hope everybody takes that note above everything, in addition to everything.
Mm-hmm.
You dropped an acronym in there, FAHI. Will you open that up for everyone?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's what they call themselves now. They started as the Federation of Appalachian Housing Enterprises. And the work that my friend Jim King and his team have done over the last 20 years is just phenomenal. There used to be a loose-knit group of small housing providers in some of the hardest places in America to work. Sneedville, Tennessee, Hazard, Kentucky, Beards Fork, West Virginia. I've been to all those places, so I can tick them off for you. But they have really built a strong network of affiliates in Tennessee. The numbers now include some public housing authorities. A couple of they are themselves a NeighborWorks affiliate, but have other NeighborWorks groups as part of that. And it lets them bring some economies of scale, some lending resources, some development capital, some organizational support. And as a result, it is a very, very effective group of nonprofits that do great work on housing and really financial stability for a lot of the families that they serve. Housing is a big part of it, but they're also involved in some other things. I think FAHI they are THDA's indispensable partner in the eastern part of our state, and just excellent people. And I always enjoy that we work well with them, and we've been able to support a lot of their key projects.
Fantastic. Yeah, I worked with FAHI at the Housing Fund, so that was great.
Yeah.
This was great. I think if somebody walks away and they don't have any types of knowledge nuggets, boy, I don't know if they paid attention, because this has just been really informative. And I really hope that this is an opportunity for emerging developers as well as experienced
Mhm,
developers and maybe for-profit
mhm,
developers who want to do this work but are very
mhm.
unsure of where to start. I hope this is just one of many resources and thought resources.
Sure. You know, and again, I always draw people. We have I think a pretty good and recently redesigned webpage, thda.org, that can give you a good background on the programs we administer, the resources that we have to help along. And I think if you talk to some of the nonprofit partners that we have, they can connect you with organizations that do really very good training. The National Development Council has periodic sessions that really walk you through how you put together a deal. Um, NeighborWorks has some excellent trainings. Take advantage of the experience of your partners. And I think you'll find a lot of people who are anxious to help you get started in affordable housing development. But probably ask you not to do it in competition with them. But we need the way to take price pressure off rents, and the way to take price pressure off entry level homes for purchase is to get more things built. And a lot goes into causing that to happen. But having people who are interested and able to build it and willing to put some of these things together is a big first step.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, this has been great. It's exactly what I think we needed. And I really want to just thank you for your time today. And if anyone has any questions, are they able to reach out, or should they reach out through us, and then we'll
Mhm.
field any questions they
Probably
have?
best let you filter that, and then
Sounds good.
you and I can figure out the best person to THDA for them to talk to.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a fantastic day.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Take care.
All right.